The devil doesn't come dressed in red with horns. He comes as everything you ever trusted. And sometimes he's sitting at your dinner table, asking for seconds. That's the kind of devil we're talking about today. The kind that smiles in your face while sharpening the knife behind your back. The kind that pretends to be your biggest fan while secretly hoping you fall. And now they've slipped up. The mask cracked. You caught them red-handed, and not because you were suspicious, but because you were spiritually precise. See, this isn't about guessing games. This is about energy. You didn't need evidence written in ink. You felt the shift in the room when they walked in. The air changed. The silence got loud, and your spirit whispered, "It's them." Every fake compliment, every weird joke with that off vibe, every time they watched your wins with dead eyes, your soul was clocking it all like a surveillance camera. And guess what? Playback just hit. They're exposed. Fully. Brutally. No filters left. And before we get any deeper, if this message is already punching the truth in your chest, do the right thing. Press that like button and subscribe. That's how we push this truth to more souls who need it. Because staying silent helps the enemy. And spreading light? That's our job now. So let's talk facts. The people you gave the most to were often the ones who secretly envied you the most. That's the twisted irony of being chosen. You're chosen for a path they could never handle, yet they still want the crown without surviving the storm. They didn't want your journey. They wanted your glow. But the glow was never for sale. It came from pain. It came from silence. It came from nights where you doubted yourself because they gaslit you into thinking you were the problem. But deep down, you knew. You always knew. They called you too sensitive when you noticed the shade, too dramatic when you confronted the disrespect, too paranoid when your gut started to speak louder than their lies. But the truth is, they just weren't used to someone who could see through them without needing proof. You didn't read their messages. You read their energy. You didn't stalk their moves. You watched their patterns. You didn't need receipts. The universe handed you revelation. And here's the part that hurts the most. They needed you to stay blind. Your awareness was a threat. Your clarity was a mirror. And the moment you started pulling back, protecting your peace, and questioning the vibes, they panicked. Suddenly, you were the problem. Suddenly, you changed. But the only thing that changed was your tolerance for their BS. Let's be real, these weren't just friends or family. Some of them were raised beside you, ate with you, slept under the same roof, and the entire time, they were studying your downfall like it was a school subject. And when they couldn't destroy you, they tried to distort how others saw you. That's the level of petty we're dealing with here. But that fake loyalty, it always leaks. Because when someone's heart isn't clean, it eventually shows in how they clap for you. And now they've been caught, not just slipping, exposed. You've got the energy readout, the missed calls, the weird timing, the fake check-ins right before something bad happens in your life. They weren't checking in. They were checking up, watching, waiting, and hoping you wouldn't notice they were the storm behind the rain. But you did, and now the universe is flipping the script. The same people who whispered about you in corners are now panicking in silence. Why? Because they know you know, and nothing is scarier to a manipulator than someone who doesn't react, just moves. Quietly, strategically, without warning. And maybe you haven't said anything yet. Maybe you've been holding it in, watching, collecting. Trust me, that silence, that's the loudest alarm. Because once a chosen one starts protecting their peace like a fortress, it's already too late for the traitors. You're not petty, you're just finally done feeding people who only came to steal. And if they're watching this now, good. Let it sink in. Let every word feel like a spotlight they can't run from. Let it echo, because you caught them red-handed, not with proof, but with truth. And now, they've got nowhere to hide. So if your hands are shaking, your heart is racing, and your mind is screaming, "I knew it," that's not coincidence, that's confirmation. And if this message feels personal, it's because it is. This isn't just a video, it's a mirror. A mirror for those who were gaslit, lied to, and made to feel insane, when all along their spirit was sharp enough to catch the snake mid-slither. So drop a comment below with 777 if you're done pretending you didn't see what you saw. And if this message hit something real in you, consider hitting the like, subscribing, or even sending a super thanks, because exposing this level of truth takes energy. And your support, whether it's a word, a click, or a cent, helps keep this fire burning. We don't just speak it, we live it. And now, let's get into it step by step. If you really are the chosen one, this next part is going to hit you harder than the first. You'll feel it in your chest. So stay with me, because the deeper we go, the clearer it gets. Let's begin. Number 1, they thought your intuition was a guess. They laughed at your silence until they realized it was the sound of you collecting evidence. See, they thought they were winning because you didn't fight back, because you didn't explode, because you stayed calm while they tried to twist your reality. But the truth is, you weren't ignoring the signs. You were tracking them. You weren't confused. You were calculating. And now, the trap they set for you just snapped back and caught them. That's the difference between you and them. They move off ego. You move off instinct. They play the short game. You play for legacy. You're not loud because you're weak. You're silent because you're strategic. They never saw it coming because they assumed you were emotional, not intelligent. But what they didn't realize is that being chosen doesn't mean you walk around glowing and holy all day. It means your soul was built for war, spiritual war, mental war, psychological chess. And you, chosen one, just checkmated the ones who thought they were pulling the strings. Let's break something down. Your intuition was never a guess. It was data, stored, archived, sorted, played back on a loop at night while you were trying to sleep but couldn't because something in you knew they were lying. Something in you felt the glitch in their energy. Something in you caught the tension in their smile, the hesitation in their laugh, the way their support felt staged. You knew, but you didn't react, not right away. Because your soul doesn't panic. It prepares. They thought your kindness meant you didn't know better. They assumed you'd never leave. That's what made them bold. That's what made them sloppy. And in their arrogance, they exposed themselves, replayed conversations, made jokes that weren't jokes, told on themselves by trying too hard to look innocent. They underestimated how much a chosen one remembers, not just what was said, but how it felt. And when your gut locks in on someone's energy, there's no talking your way out of it. Think about it. How many times did they gaslight you for being too sensitive, only to later slip and reveal the very thing you were picking up on? How many times did they try to flip the script, paint you as crazy, overly emotional, paranoid, just because your soul refused to ignore the truth? But guess what? That sensitivity they mocked. That's what saved you. That was your early warning radar, and they were blind to it. Let me hit you with something real. Steve Jobs once said, "Intuition is more powerful than intellect." And that's exactly why people feared him, just like they fear you, because your intuition sees beyond their resume, their smile, their performance. You don't care what mask they wear. Your spirit sees their core. And when you're chosen, that spiritual sight comes with a price. Isolation, betrayal, being misunderstood. But it also comes with power. And now they're learning what happens when a chosen one stops doubting themselves and starts trusting what they feel. You were never guessing, you were gathering, and while they were out there rehearsing their lies, playing innocent, painting themselves as the victim, you were putting together the timeline, watching the shifts, matching the patterns, connecting the vibes. They thought you were distracted. Nah, you were just letting them dig their own grave with every shady move. Here's what makes it worse for them. You didn't just figure it out. You sat on it. You let them keep talking, keep lying. You let them think they got away with it. That silence, that was you building your case. And now the entire tower of deception is crumbling under the weight of your quiet awareness. And now that you've spoken, now that you've pulled the curtain back and said, "I saw it all," they're shook. Because the fear of being seen for who they really are, that's louder than any scream. That's what they never wanted. Not exposure to the world, but exposure to you, the one they wronged, the one who gave them chance after chance, the one who loved them when they were still fake, smiling through their hate, the one they never thought would see them. But you saw it. And now that you've confirmed it, everything's shifting. They're paranoid, panicked, watching your moves like you're the threat now. And guess what? You are. But not because you're out to get revenge. It's because you've reclaimed your vision. You've awakened to the power they tried to convince you didn't exist. The moment you realized your intuition wasn't broken, it was accurate, was the moment they lost access to your soul forever. And let's be honest, this isn't new. Chosen ones throughout history were always doubted before they were proven right. Think about Harriet Tubman. She was led by visions, warnings, inner knowing, and they called her crazy, until she freed hundreds. Think of Nikola Tesla. He said he received downloads in dreams, and they laughed, until his ideas changed the entire world. It's always the spiritually aware ones that get mocked first, until the results speak louder than the critics. So if you're sitting here right now feeling conflicted, don't. You weren't wrong for questioning them. You weren't wrong for going quiet. You weren't wrong for feeling like something was off, even when the facts weren't all there. Because now the facts have caught up. Now the dots have fully connected. And now your silence is no longer holding the truth hostage. It's setting it free. They feared you would figure it out. And now that you have, their worst nightmare is here. So let them sit in the tension. Let them wonder what you'll do next. Let them panic in the same silence they once weaponized against you. Because chosen ones don't seek revenge, they rebuild. But that doesn't mean you forget. That doesn't mean you pretend. It means you rise, sharper, wiser, and no longer available for betrayal dressed in love. You were never guessing. You were watching. And now, they're the ones looking over their shoulder. Number 2, they played puppet master, but you were wired to a power they couldn't touch. They thought they were the director of your story, writing scenes, cutting characters, and controlling your fate like it was some twisted play. They tried to pull your strings behind the scenes, spreading lies, creating chaos, whispering poison into the ears of others, all while pretending to be your biggest supporter. But what they didn't realize is this: you were never their puppet. You were the spark they couldn't control, the glitch in their game, the quiet storm they never saw coming. See, they were addicted to power, the illusion of it. They wanted to feel like they were above you, ahead of you, smarter than you. They needed to believe they could shape your life from the shadows like they were gods. But the problem is, they weren't dealing with an ordinary soul. They were dealing with a chosen one. And chosen ones aren't built to be controlled. We're wired to withstand control and outlast it. They may have had people, noise and fake influence on their side, but you had something they couldn't access: connection. You were connected to a force far bigger than their schemes. Not religion, not ritual, resonance, a direct line to the universe, the true architect of your purpose. They mocked that power because they couldn't see it. They tried to play God in your life, but they forgot one brutal truth. Real power doesn't need to be loud. It just moves in silence and strikes with precision. While they were out there manipulating rooms, you were being spiritually moved into the right position. They twisted stories, but the truth started folding back on them. They painted you as the villain, but the light kept finding its way back to you. That wasn't luck. That was divine law. That was the quiet intelligence of the universe balancing out the scales. Not when you wanted it, but when it mattered most. Let's be clear, they weren't smarter. They were just more willing to lie, cheat, and twist the game. They confused manipulation with intelligence, control with wisdom. But chosen ones, we don't need to lie. We let time do the talking. And now, time is up. The same people who laughed at your intuition, who mocked your stillness, who thought your calm was weakness, they're the ones spiraling. Because the very thing they tried to destroy in secret is now rising in public. They didn't know that your silence was spiritual warfare. Every time you didn't react, the universe took notes. Every time you walked away instead of clapping back, your energy was being weaponized against them in a way they couldn't see coming. While they were playing chess with dirty hands, you were letting karma make her move. And now, checkmate. They've run out of pieces to move, out of lies to spin, out of people to fool. Here's the truth they can't face. It was never a fair fight. They were playing God, but you were walking with the blueprint. You didn't need to shout. Your protection was already in place. They thought they had access to your life, your heart, your path, but the whole time they were locked out of the most important part, your source. And without that access, they were just swinging in the dark, hoping to land a blow. But the real damage, that's on them now. Because when you try to control a chosen one's destiny, you end up sabotaging your own. They burned bridges you built for them. They destroyed connections you protected. And they did it thinking they'd come out untouched, not realizing they were signing their own spiritual eviction notice. Because the universe doesn't play favorites, but it does protect purpose, and yours. It's untouchable. Think about all the times you felt like everything was falling apart. You thought you were losing, you thought they were winning, but that breakdown was actually your breakthrough loading in the background. That rejection, redirection, that betrayal, revelation. They thought they were taking you down, but they were pushing you toward your awakening. And now that you're fully awake, oh, they're terrified. They should be, because now they know you're not just aware, you're aligned. They can't distract you with noise anymore. They can't bait you into drama. You're moving with a clarity that cuts through all their games. You're not trying to prove yourself. You don't need to. The truth has a heartbeat now, and it's getting louder every day. You don't have to expose them. They exposed themselves by trying to play God with a soul that was never theirs to control. And now they're the ones watching you, watching your glow return, watching your peace expand, watching the same people they poisoned with lies slowly start to see the truth. That's the thing with chosen ones. You can't dim our light without setting the whole room on fire. And baby, the fire's already started. So if you're sitting there wondering why they did it, why they tried to ruin you, here's the answer. They envied your light. They hated the way you could rise without scheming. They couldn't stand that. Even when they threw dirt on your name, flowers still grew around you. That's the power of real connection. That's the weight of being chosen. They wanted your position, but they didn't want your process. They didn't want to go through the pain, the isolation, the inner work. They wanted the reward without the refinement. So instead of rising on their own, they tried to tear you down. But all they did was prove they could never carry what you were born to hold. So let them scramble, let them panic, let them feel the heat of their own schemes turning to smoke. Because the same force they mocked is now moving. And it's not coming to play, it's coming to clear the path. Not just for you, but for everyone who's ever been manipulated by those who thought they were God. They thought they were untouchable, but now the mirror's in their face, and every lie they told, every plot they made, every smile they faked, it's all crashing down. Because when you mess with a chosen one, you don't just mess with a person, you disrupt purpose, and purpose, it always wins. They played puppet master, but you were connected to the one pulling all the strings. Number 3, they thought you were powerless, but you were just watching them walk into their own trap. You didn't need to shout, you didn't need to expose them early, and you sure as hell didn't need to prove yourself to anyone. Why? Because you knew what they didn't. Time always tells the truth. You felt it in your bones from the beginning. That off energy, that fake laugh, that weird silence when you walked into the room. Your spirit caught it all long before your brain could make sense of it. But instead of reacting like they wanted, you chose patience. And that's what destroyed them. Because you weren't being passive, you were being surgical, you weren't avoiding confrontation, you were letting them think they were safe. You gave them enough rope, and now they're choking on their own lies. That's what always happens when manipulators think they've won. They get sloppy, they start talking too much, scheming too openly, laughing too loud. And that's when they fall, not because you pushed them, but because they danced too close to the edge, thinking no one was watching. But you were watching. Every move, every slip-up, every contradiction in their story. You were mentally documenting everything while they thought they had you wrapped. You let them believe they were the puppeteer, when really they were performing on a stage that was already set to collapse. And now it collapsed, loudly. Let me tell you something real. This is what master-level awareness looks like. This is the kind of patience that breaks legacies of manipulation. They called you passive, but you were playing psychological chess, while they were playing checkers with a blindfold. And the universe saw it all. It was never going to let them get away clean. It was just waiting for the perfect moment, your moment, where everything lined up and the truth exploded on its own. Think of Malcolm X. They tried to smear him, isolate him, and twist his words, but time exposed every lie told about him. Or Princess Diana. They tried to control the narrative, but history flipped the script. The truth always returns. And the same way they got caught up in their own lies, so did yours. You didn't have to swing. They handed you the win with their own arrogance, and now they're the ones questioning everything. How much do you know? How long have you known? When did you stop trusting me? And the answer is simple. long before you ever let it show. That's what eats them alive. Not just that they're exposed, but that they don't even know when the tables turned. That's what haunts manipulators, knowing they were being studied the entire time. So now what? Now you rise, quietly, gracefully, powerfully. You don't need to blast them. You don't need to prove anything. Your glow-up is the closure, your peace is the punishment, and your silence, still the loudest sound in the room. They wanted you to react. You evolved instead. They tried to destroy you. You just watched them destroy themselves. And now the truth is staring them in the face, and they have no escape. Number 4, they lied like professionals, but you held the truth like a weapon. Let's get one thing straight. They weren't smarter. They were just more shameless. They lied with confidence, twisted facts with a straight face, and repeated the same story so many times that even they started believing it. But that's not intelligence. That's survival mode. That's what people do when they know they have nothing real to stand on. And you didn't need to lie. You didn't need to perform, because you had truth on your side, and truth never needs rehearsal. They were addicted to control, so they weaponized charm. They used eye contact, fake vulnerability, exaggerated kindness, and calculated empathy to make others doubt you instead of questioning them. But charm isn't character. Manipulation isn't mastery. And when you refuse to play their game, it drives them crazy. Because deep down, they know they could never outthink you. They could only outlie you. And that was their whole strategy. You kept your hands clean, even when you were misunderstood, even when they tried to bait you into reacting, into clapping back, into becoming just like them. You didn't. That's power. That's spiritual discipline. Because it's easy to lie. It's easy to get dirty. But the chosen ones, we hold a different standard. While they were spreading rumors, you were holding your peace. While they were working overtime to twist the narrative, you were building something real behind the scenes. Your healing, your vision, your legacy. Here's the thing, lies are like spoiled meat. No matter how well you season it, the rot still spreads, and people started to smell it. You didn't have to say a word. The same crowd they manipulated, they're starting to notice. The cracks are showing. The smiles don't feel right. The energy's off. The charm is glitching. And the universe, oh, it's pulling the curtain all the way back. Think about it. Even the biggest cons in history fell the same way. Elizabeth Holmes, Bernie Madoff, their lies weren't weak. They were convincing, smooth, believable, until they weren't. Because lies don't age well. They unravel under pressure. And now the liar in your story is doing just that, unraveling. You didn't need to fight them. You just needed to outlast them. And you did. With your dignity intact, with your truth sharp, with your spirit clean. That's what separates you from them. Not just the facts, but the frequency. You vibrate higher. You walk different. You speak different. Because you never had to pretend to be good. You are. So let them fall. Let their mask melt under the heat of exposure. Let them scramble for another story, another excuse, another person to blame. Because at the end of the day, they didn't lose because you exposed them. They lost because truth doesn't need help to win. And now you're standing tall, not because you played dirty, but because you never had to. Number 5, they watched you like a predator, but you were quietly becoming a weapon. They thought they were the hunter, the strategist, the master manipulator holding the strings. They studied you like a predator studies prey, calculating, cold, obsessed. Every silence you kept, they took as fear. Every delay in your response, they mistook for weakness. But little did they know, you were studying them back. not with desperation, with discipline, not to destroy, but to survive. And now, that quiet study session is over. The exam just hit, and they're failing it miserably. They clocked your patterns, your habits, your moods, hoping to find the crack in your armor. But you weren't cracked, you were morphing. What they saw as vulnerability was transformation in progress. What they interpreted as fear was strategy. You weren't reacting because you were too stunned. You were building a mental archive, silent, sharp, soul deep. See, you weren't just enduring their tactics, you were cataloging them, every betrayal, every manipulation, every time they spoke with two faces. You didn't speak because you were stacking evidence. Every time they thought they had you pinned, you were turning the page in a story they didn't realize you were writing. And now they're standing in a chapter titled Consequences. And the craziest part, you didn't even have to write it with revenge in your heart. You wrote it with resilience in your bones. That's what they didn't count on. Your ability to endure. Your ability to take pain and turn it into precision. They expected you to be a victim, to break down, to spiral. But you were becoming a living archive, a walking witness to their lies. Your silence was never submission. It was recording mode. They thought they were controlling you, but they were educating you, and now their own lessons are crashing back down on them. All that studying they did, it taught you how to see through people. It sharpened your intuition. It built your discernment. They created a version of you they now can't deceive. And that terrifies them. You are not who you were when they started the game. You're the upgraded version, stronger, smarter, quieter, deadlier, not in revenge, but in truth. You know how they move. You've seen their full playbook. They have no more surprises, no more masks that work on you. And now the mirror is up, and it's your hand holding it. You're showing them what they really are. No filters, no fake smiles, no escape. Their panic now, that's not guilt, it's fear. Fear that the person they underestimated is the one walking away with all the power. And make no mistake, you are. Because you weren't just surviving, you were studying for the war. And now that it's here, you're already 10 steps ahead. Because they built their plans on ego. But you built your strength in silence, in solitude, in those long nights where it felt like no one saw what was happening. But the universe saw it, and it kept your memory sharp. It kept your spirit alert. It kept receipts in your soul that no liar can overwrite. You are not broken, you're witness built. You are not soft, you're battle hardened. And now, the test is over. The truth is out. And the student has become the storm. Number 6, they tried to paint you as crazy because your truth was a loaded weapon aimed at their lies. They didn't just lie, they strategized. They didn't just gaslight, they engineered confusion. Everything they did was calculated, precise, cold, because they knew if even one drop of your truth leaked out, it would drown the entire fantasy they built around themselves. That's why they came for your sanity first, not your story, not your facts, your mind. Because if they could make you look unstable, then everything you said, every warning, every truth, every red flag you raised could be dismissed as emotional or overthinking. That was their plan all along, to silence you before you spoke. To damage your credibility so deeply that even you started questioning your reality. They weren't afraid of what people would think of you. They were afraid of what people would discover about them if they believed you. Because your truth, it wasn't just uncomfortable, it was criminal. If exposed, it would drag everything they built into the dirt and reveal exactly who they really are behind that polished mask. So they worked overtime to destroy your image, called you dramatic, too sensitive, said you read too much into things. They laughed at your pain and then told everyone you were obsessed. They twisted your reactions so it looked like you were the one creating the chaos they orchestrated. And the worst part? Some people believed it. Some turned away from you, not because you were wrong, but because they were afraid of siding with the truth when the lie was easier to digest. But here's the thing about truth. It doesn't need validation. It echoes, quietly, consistently, and eventually it breaks through. You didn't have to scream. You didn't have to beg people to see it. The truth simply waited. And now, it's no longer whispering. It's roaring. The same people who doubted you are starting to look again. And what they see now, it's not someone who's crazy. It's someone who was cornered. Someone who held it together when the world tried to tear them apart. Someone who walked through the fire while being blamed for starting it, and still came out clean. Because while they were playing mind games, you were holding on to something unshakable, your truth. And that truth, it's undefeated, because it's not built on opinion or narrative. It's built on receipts, on energy, on that unexplainable inner knowing that never wavered, no matter how hard they tried to make you doubt it. Now their hands are shaking, their stories are crumbling, their circle of believers is shrinking, and you're calm, you're steady, because the tables didn't just turn. You flipped the whole damn room. The liar is exposed. The manipulator is twitching under pressure, and the one they tried to paint as broken is the one holding the brush now. Let them scramble, let them panic. Because now, when they try to call you crazy, people aren't laughing anymore. They're listening. And the more they try to explain, the more obvious it becomes that they were the chaos all along. You never lost your mind. You were just gaslit by people who couldn't afford your truth. And now that the mask is slipping, they finally understand what real fear feels like. Because a chosen one's silence is scary, but a chosen one who's been believed, that's lethal. Number 7. It wasn't you they feared. It was what you could see. They were never scared of your anger. They were scared of your clarity. Rage can be dismissed. Passion can be twisted. But awareness is lethal because it doesn't make noise. It sees. And when you started seeing through them, that's when the panic set in. Not because you shouted back, but because you stopped reacting at all. Your silence became a mirror, and it showed them everything they tried to bury, their lies, their insecurities, their deep-rooted fear of being truly known. That's what they never wanted, to be seen. They were comfortable as long as they could play you, as long as they could dance behind the scenes and keep you doubting yourself. But the moment you became conscious of the game, the board flipped. Because awareness doesn't need evidence. It doesn't need a smoking gun. It reads energy, tone, timing, the way someone smiles too quickly or dodges accountability with a joke. Awareness is spiritual. And once you stepped into that level of vision, nothing they did could touch you anymore. You started catching their patterns, noticing how their words never matched their actions. You didn't call them out right away. You didn't have to. You just evolved. You stopped engaging. You stopped giving them the fuel they needed to manipulate you. You stopped being predictable. And that's when they started to crack. Because manipulators need control, and control only works on those who can't see the strings. But you started seeing everything, the fear behind their arrogance, the desperation behind their silence, the brokenness behind their attacks, and that scared them more than anything. Because a person who understands why someone lies can never be controlled by the lie. You were never the threat in their story. You were the reveal, and reveals terrify people who have built their whole identity on illusion. The truth in your eyes stripped their mask, and no amount of charm or chaos could distract you anymore. Look at history. The most dangerous people to corrupt systems were always the most aware. People like Viktor Frankl, who endured the Holocaust and still saw deeper meaning in suffering, or James Baldwin, who exposed racism with clarity, not chaos. They weren't feared because they were loud, but because they understood. And you, chosen one, are no different. Your awareness made their tactics useless. Your detachment made their bait invisible. And your peace, that was the death of their power. Because nothing terrifies a manipulator more than someone who doesn't need them anymore. You stopped arguing. You stopped proving. You stopped begging people to see what you saw. Because now, the universe is showing them for you. You became the threat, not because you fought dirty, but because you started walking clean. Untouchable, unavailable, unshaken. And now they don't just feel exposed, they feel powerless. You weren't their enemy, but your awareness made them their own. And that's a war they can't win. That's why you're unstoppable now, not because you fought harder, but because you finally saw through it all. Number 8. They didn't fake love because you weren't enough. They faked it because real love would have exposed them instantly. They never loved you. Not really. They just wore love like a costume. Something convincing enough to slip past your intuition, something sweet enough to keep you second-guessing your instincts. But real love would have ruined them. Because real love requires truth. Real love demands presence. And they couldn't afford to show you the truth about who they really were. They knew that if they ever gave you authentic, soul-level love, every mask they wore would shatter on impact. Why? Because love brings light, and light reveals everything. So instead of loving you truthfully, they loved you strategically. Like a magician with a deck of loaded cards, they gave you just enough to make you hope, but never enough to feel safe. It was a calculated trap. They used attention as a leash, compliments as camouflage, silence as punishment. They wrapped manipulation in affection and called it connection. They weren't feeding your soul, they were feeding your confusion. Fake love became their favorite weapon, because they knew the moment you felt real love, their entire illusion would collapse. So they kept you in limbo, just enough kindness to keep you hanging on, just enough guilt to keep you apologizing for things you didn't do. It wasn't love, it was emotional warfare with a smile on its face. And the sick part? They studied what you needed. They studied the kind of love you deserved, and then counterfeited it. But here's the thing about fake love. It always slips. Eventually, the warmth turns cold. The compliments turn condescending. The silence gets louder. Their performance gets sloppy. And then, out of nowhere, the mask slips mid-conversation. And there it is. That flicker of contempt in their eyes. That smug silence. That sudden shift in tone. And you realize they were never trying to love you. They were trying to control you, because real love would have required them to be vulnerable. And people like this, they hate vulnerability because it exposes their wounds, their insecurities, their fears. And that kind of exposure would have given you the power. So they faked it, masked it, mocked it. Because the truth is, they were terrified of what would happen if someone like you ever saw them clearly. But you see it now, don't you? You see how every "I miss you" was a rope, how every "you're too sensitive" was a dart, how every moment of affection came with a shadow. And now that shadow can't hide anymore. Their fake love is cracking, not because you forced it, but because your awareness burns hotter than their lies. You didn't miss the red flags. You just gave the benefit of the doubt. You didn't fall because you were weak. You fell because you were real. And your realness scared them. It still does. Because fake love can only survive when real love is absent. And now that you're awake, that fake version withers on sight. You've reclaimed your clarity, your boundaries, your power, and now there's no going back, no more romanticizing manipulation, no more calling control passion. You don't need crumbs when you were built for a feast. You don't need someone who loves in pieces when you were born whole. So let them keep pretending. Let them try the same script on someone new, because their story is tired, and you're done being the audience. You were never the one who lacked love. You were the one who understood it too well, and that's what scared them from the start. Because if you ever got a taste of the real thing, you'd never settle for a counterfeit again. And now, you won't. Ever. Number 9. They didn't hate you. They hated what you reflected back at them. It was never about you being too much. It was never about you being flawed or wrong or dramatic. No, their issue was never your darkness. It was your light, the way you carried clarity like a weapon, the way your spirit saw through things without needing proof. That scared them, not because you were perfect, but because you were pure. Pure in your awareness, pure in your intention. And that purity, it burned them like sunlight on a wound they've been hiding their whole life. You didn't walk in judging them. You didn't come for their crown. You were just present. And that presence was enough to unravel the entire identity they built to hide from themselves. Because people like them, they don't want truth. They want comfort. And nothing is more uncomfortable to the broken than someone who refuses to break with them. So what did they do? They projected. They weaponized their own shame, wrapped it in accusation, and handed it to you like it was your fault. You became the scapegoat for everything they couldn't face. Their bitterness? Blamed on your attitude. Their guilt? Covered by calling you too sensitive. Their jealousy, disguised as concern. They painted you as unstable, disloyal, selfish, not because you were any of those things, but because they were, and they couldn't stand to see it without a mask. You became a mirror, and they couldn't stand the reflection, so they tried to break the mirror instead. They made you question your light, made you feel contaminated just for being clear, made you carry the weight of wounds you didn't create. But here's the truth. Light doesn't absorb shadows, it dissolves them. And that's exactly what you've done. You didn't shrink, you didn't hide, you didn't let their projections stick. You stood in your light until their darkness started to leak, not just in your eyes, but in the eyes of everyone around them. The energy doesn't lie. And now, neither do the results. They thought they could throw their demons onto you and watch you drown. But you turned their darkness into fuel. You became sharper, wiser, more precise in your vision. You didn't just survive the weight, you alchemized it into freedom. And now, that same light they tried to dim is exposing everything. The masks, the lies, the envy, the rot. They can't run from it anymore, because your clarity doesn't blink. It doesn't beg. It just burns through everything false until only truth remains. They hate you more now, not because you fought back, but because you never collapsed. Because you walked through the accusations, the projections, the gaslighting, and came out clean. You weren't diseased. You were divinely disinfecting the room. And now, everyone's starting to smell the truth. That's the power of being chosen. You don't just walk into rooms, you reveal them. And now, they're choking on the light they tried to extinguish. Number 10, they mocked your spirit. Now they're running from what it sees. They thought your spirituality was soft, a crutch, a fairy tale. They rolled their eyes when you talked about energy, laughed behind closed doors when you spoke about intuition, called you too emotional, too deep, too weird. They assumed because you didn't fight like them, manipulate like them, or lie like them, that you were naive, vulnerable, easy prey. But what they missed, what they still don't fully understand, is that your so-called weirdness was a weapon being forged in silence. While they sharpened gossip and deception, you were sharpening discernment. Spiritual discernment. The kind of sight that doesn't need proof to recognize a pattern. The kind of knowing that doesn't require evidence to feel the truth bleeding through a lie. They laughed when you said you were spiritual, but it was that same spirit that caught them mid-scheme. It was that same unseen force that showed you the cracks in their story, the fear behind their smile, the darkness hidden beneath their charm. Your intuition didn't just evolve, it activated, and now it's terrifying them. Because now you see, you don't just feel off. You pinpoint deception like a laser. You clock manipulation mid-sentence. You read energy before words even hit the air. This isn't guesswork. This is supernatural clarity, the kind that cuts through pretense like a blade. They can't play dumb around you anymore. They can't lie freely. They can't perform with ease. You see it all, the patterns, the tactics, the fear behind their confidence. And the worst part for them, you're no longer speaking to them like they matter. You're moving in silence, letting the universe speak for you, because you no longer need to prove anything. When your spirit is activated, presence alone speaks louder than words. That's the real power of being spiritual. Not crystals or candles, clarity, not fantasy, frequency. It's the divine intelligence running through your veins, warning you before the storm hits, showing you the trap before you fall in. It's not just intuition anymore, it's insight with receipts. And while they mocked it, you mastered it. Now the same people who called you delusional are watching you move with a confidence they can't understand. And their laughter, gone. Their confidence, shaken. Because your discernment isn't just picking up on vibes. It's decoding people in real time. On levels they can't even comprehend. They used to whisper about your weirdness. Now they fear your silence, because that silence, it knows something. That silence sees straight through them. That silence is spiritually dangerous, and that's what it means to be chosen. You don't just survive the deception. You spot it, strip it, and outgrow it. And now you've outgrown them. Let them laugh, because now you see everything. Now that you've seen the truth laid bare, remember this. Your power comes from your awareness and patience. You're not here to play small or settle for shadows. You are the chosen one, standing tall while the lies crumble around you. If this message hit home and opened your eyes, show some love, hit like, subscribe, and share to spread this truth to others who need it. Drop the number 77 in the comments if you're ready to own your power and rise above the darkness. Together, we shine brighter and expose the shadows hiding in plain sight.